Hello, Betty. My name is Quasga. Betty was amazed when she heard the mysterious being speak. She was sure that Quasga had not opened his mouth or made any sound. In fact, the voice was directly in Betty's head. The key point was, how did Quasga know Betty's name? Maybe it was because there were too many strange things happening that day. So, after hesitating for a few seconds, Betty decided to answer. Hello everyone. Do you need me to bring you some water or something to eat? No, our food is different from yours. We eat knowledge tempered by fire. When I heard this, I had no idea what knowledge tempered by fire meant. But it doesn't matter if we don't understand, as long as Betty understands. Betty went to the bookshelf in the living room and took out a copy of the Bible. She handed it to Quasga, and then the miracle happened. When Quasga picked up the Bible, it began to glow with white light. It also began to thicken, as if Quasga was using some kind of special power to restore the missing content of the Bible. But that wasn't the most miraculous part. After the Bible had thickened, it multiplied into 4 copies. So, each of the aliens present now held a copy of the Bible. They read it all in less than a minute. And during the reading, the aliens' left eyes kept twitching. But Betty was no longer surprised by this. After the aliens had finished reading the book, Betty asked them a question. Why have you come here? We have come to help. Help with what? We want to help your world. Your world is destroying itself. What can I do to help? We hope that you will come with us. Will you? Betty was hesitant. She was willing to help, because she believed that the aliens were angels. But if she went with the angels, what would happen to her children? Thinking about this, Betty turned to look at her family who were standing still. And then, just as Betty was thinking these thoughts, Quasga, who was able to read her mind, once again used telepathy to speak to Betty. Don't worry, nothing will happen to your family. We will not harm them. They are safe. But just as Betty remembered this important point, her memory came to a break. According to Professor Hynek, during the investigation of Project Blue Book, he noticed that many people who had encountered aliens had amnesia. Therefore, after discovering that Betty's family also had such symptoms, he immediately sent investigator Raymond E. Fowler to investigate. It is worth noting that Hynek was a scientist, so when investigating UFO events, his team would not blindly believe the accounts of witnesses, but would investigate the entire event scientifically. During the investigation, hypnosis will be used to help witnesses regain their memories, as well as cross-examine witness testimony, physical evidence, analyze witness personality, and even use a lie detector. After more than a year of in-depth research, both Hynek and Raymond agreed that what happened to Betty was a very rare Type 4 contact. It turns out that Dr. Hynek also divided reliable UFO sighting events into 3 types. Type 1, CE1, refers to cases where a UFO is seen within a distance of 500 feet, about 150 meters, and can be described in detail. Type 2, CE2, refers to cases where physical evidence is left behind, such as marks on the ground, scorched marks, excessive radiation, etc. Type 3, CE3, only refers to cases where not only the UFO is clearly seen, but also the aliens inside can be seen and talked to. It is worth noting that with the continuous occurrence of alien events later, the original 3 types of contact were also supplemented and expanded by other scholars, so there was Type 4 inches contact. Type 4, CE4, refers to cases of alien abduction. For example, the extremely famous event of Barney and Betty Hill couple. Type 5, CE5, refers to cases of secret dealings with aliens. Type 6, CE6, refers to cases of conflict with aliens, such as the Roswell Dulce Base incident, which is a Type 6 contact. Type 7, CE7, refers to the case that humans and aliens have close relationships and give birth to the next generation. Type 8, CE8, refers to the case that aliens invade Earth. Type 9, CE9, refers to the case that humans and aliens establish diplomatic relations. The Andreasson event, which we are talking about today, is a Type 4 contact, in which only Betty and her family lost their memory. Therefore, Dr. Hynek also sent hypnotist Harold J. Edelstein to investigate. However, what surprised the doctor was that in the end, they discovered that the Andreasson event was far beyond the 9 types of contact mentioned above. In fact, Dr. Hynek even believed that the Andreasson event was the most important report of contact with aliens to date. So what happened to Betty that could shock Dr. Hynek so much? In 1977, Raymond led a team of professional investigators to meet Betty. Through the team's assessment, they felt that it was necessary to hypnotize her. So with the help of the hypnotist, Betty went back to that night. At this time, the alien Quasga was standing in front of Betty through telepathy to invite Betty to board the spaceship. The hypnotist asked, "So you went up with them?" Betty replied, "Yes, because I believed that they would not harm me." And as soon as Betty agreed, Quasga signaled for Betty to stand behind him, and the other aliens lined up behind Betty. And then, as soon as the line was formed, Betty suddenly felt a force pulling her in. In an instant, she had passed through the door of her house. "You too? You passed through the door?" the hypnotist asked. Betty replied, "Yes, I was also very surprised. At the moment I passed through the door, my body had a tingling feeling, a little bit like being surrounded by static electricity, and the whole process was very fast. Not only did she pass through the door, Betty was now outside her house, and she found that her feet were floating in the air." "Your neighbors didn't see you, did they?" "No, I don't know where the fog came from that enveloped our house." The key point is that we also specifically searched for the weather data recorded in the town of Ashburnham, Massachusetts on January 25, 1967. At 8 p.m. that day, the temperature was around 43 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 6 degrees Celsius, and the humidity was 89%. This means that there was very likely to be fog in the area that night. After the group of people including Betty passed through the fog, Betty saw the spaceship of Quasga and the others. At the exact moment when the whole line was about to hit the spaceship, the door of the ship suddenly opened and Betty got on the spaceship. And then, not long after, she regretted it. Dr. Hynek once said that the most special thing about the Andreasson event is that Betty Andreasson's testimony was very complete during the investigation. Although Betty had lost most of her memories, she was able to regain all of her lost memories through hypnosis. This is very important because when a person enters a subconscious state in a state of hypnosis, they cannot lie. Later, Raymond also released an ECG image of Betty in the book he published to prove that Betty did not lie during the test. We can even see that when Betty remembered some special memories, she was very frightened. Betty said, "After the door of the UFO opened, I stepped into a semicircular room. There was nothing in the room. It was very bright. I can see that there are 2 doors here, and Quasga is standing near the other aliens, as if they are communicating something telepathically." After they finished talking, one of the aliens signaled for me to follow them through the door on the right. At this time, I saw a glowing spiral staircase. The staircase hovered in the air. It was huge, so big that I didn't think the UFO had so much space. The feeling inside the spaceship at this time is not at the same latitude as Earth. And it is even stranger that when I lifted my foot and thought I would climb the stairs, I flew again, and then floated along the stairs and flew into the room on the 2nd floor. In the middle of the room, there was a round platform. One of the aliens said that it was a device that could help cleanse the body. I didn't think anything of it and stood on it. Then, the device was activated and a thin, glowing membrane descended. I found myself unable to move and was slowly lowered to the room below. "Can you tell us where you are now?" "I'm on an operating table. I'm not lying down, but floating. Everything here makes me feel cold and scared." "You're safe now. Don't be afraid. Are you alone in the operating room?" "Quasga is here too. I told him I didn't want to be here." "What did he say?" "He told me not to be afraid, but I was very afraid." According to Raymond, after Betty entered the room, she suddenly became very scared, even losing control of herself.
Why do you have to put that in my nose? You're putting that thing in my nose and it's going up and it's breaking through something. I don't like it. Oh, and I can't move. It's hurting.
When Betty finished saying these words, everyone suddenly realized that Betty had been abducted by aliens. This was a very special thing at the time. In the 1960s, there were not many cases of alien abduction, and even fewer cases of alien abduction that involved surgery. The most famous case was probably the Hill abduction in 1961. So when the investigators found out that Betty had also been operated on, they were very surprised. Betty continued, "They put a small tube in my nose. Did it hurt? At first, yes, but after Kwasga put his hand on my forehead, the pain disappeared. Then I heard a sound like something breaking, as if the tube had pierced something. And then when the tube was pulled out, Betty saw a strange metal ball, and she realized that she had a tracking device in her nostril. Kwasga had discovered it during the cleansing process, and Betty was very confused about why she had a tracking device in her body. She asked Kwasga, but he just told her not to worry and that they were about to leave for the alien planet. Because the journey to the alien planet required time travel, the aliens also specially took Betty to the protection chamber. Betty said that there were many human-shaped glass chairs in the protection chamber, and each chair was connected to many pipes. After Betty sat down, she found that the chairs were softer than they looked, a bit like non-foam rubber but transparent. When Betty sat up, a cage came down, and Betty found that the protective cabin had injected a special liquid, and then she soon lost consciousness. The strange thing is that later Betty found that she could breathe directly in the liquid. The point is that according to our investigation, underwater breathing is not impossible. In 2008, American cardiothoracic surgeon Arnold J. Land announced to the world that he had invented a device that could breathe underwater. Although this technology is not yet mature, Arnold's invention at least confirms that underwater breathing is not impossible, only that human technology is not yet sufficient. Not long after, when Betty woke up, they had arrived at Kwasga's planet. "Do you know the location of this planet?" "I don't know, but I asked Kwasga. He told me that it is not yet time, but they will tell us later." "Us? Do you mean Kwasga knows that we will hypnotize you later?" "No, not later, they say now. Right now they are talking to us." When the research team heard that Betty was not remembering but was connected to the aliens, Raymond's team was shocked. Although his team had always believed that aliens existed, but in the 1970s, it was very rare to talk to aliens through consciousness. Therefore, the team was almost terrified at that time. In fact, not only the investigation team was surprised, but even Betty herself was also surprised. And so, after calming down a bit and discussing, the hypnotist asked again, "Who is the person who is talking to us now?" Betty replied in a very special tone, "We are one." In the Law of One, the alien group Ra introduces themselves as a group from the 6th density social memory complex. In other words, they are a group of aliens with a collective consciousness and they are one. It is possible that the aliens that Betty encountered were the Ra group. It is also noteworthy that in the Law of One, the aliens mention that Earth is currently transitioning from the 3rd density to the 4th density. During this time of transition, humans will experience many challenges. Coincidentally, after Raymond's team discovered that they were talking to aliens, the aliens said the same thing. They even directly warned humans that it is necessary to raise spiritual consciousness, otherwise Earth will surely suffer.